Hey now, say now, you know who it is and what it is. It is yours truly, the miraculously manifesting mystical mouthpiece himself. Okay, and for the record, nationally recognized and locally accepted. Yeah, man, that babyface straight-laced top ace of this personified divine-ism. Coming to y'all live and direct from Chicago this morning. Up early, got some business to handle. But before I get up out of here, I definitely wanted to bless y'all with something. So, as usual, in fraternal greetings, I will bless you, brothers, with some Rosicrucian manuscript work. This monograph comes from the master's manuscript from the Mysteries of Ulyss. The Mysteries of Ulyss were introduced by none other than my favorite Rosicrucian, the best to ever do it, the father of North American Rosicrucianism, Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph, an African-American mystic who basically is the format, blueprint, and carbon copy of who we know as Dr. Strange. He was a hoodoo practitioner. He created magnetic pillows, money drawn and attraction oils, love potions. He taught about psychedelic kinesis and telekinesis. He taught about mirror scrying and crystal ball reading and all of this different type of stuff. He taught about the more adept chambers of mysteries so far as the pranayamas and the tantric yogas and different forms of East Indian mysticism. Middle Eastern mysticism, as well as East Indian magic traditions such as, Santeria Candomblé, hoodoo or voodoo. Is really not very clear, but for those of us that practice here in the West, we're pretty familiar with the techniques, and we know just from reading the work that is primarily hoodoo. The reason that I mentioned him is because we have to give credence to someone else who, God, you could tell I just woke up. My brain's not even functioning at its full capacity yet. But anyway, I also have to give kudos to a man by the name of Reuben Swinburne Clymer. Reuben Swinburne Clymer is primarily the reason that everyone knows who Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph is, because Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph, according to legend, he was assassinated in a similar fashion that his friend Abraham Lincoln was. Legend has it that when Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head, that Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph was on the same cart with him, but because he was black, he was told to move to the next cart, that he couldn't ride on that cart. Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph was not liked by Madam H.P. Blavatsky due to the fact that Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph had a very strong position and disposition on black survival here in North America, and he thought that black people, if we stayed here in North America, we would be inevitably doomed, that there would be a psychological attack on us, and that we would become chattel slaves again, basically. And he said the best thing for us to do was to leave the country and go to India. And because he shares such strong segregationist thoughts, so far as you have to remember, he was born in he was born in 1847, 1848. So Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph is not the type of person that came up in a time where Europeans were practicing holistic unity and not treating the rest of the world like they were beneath them. So Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph had a particular disposition that fit according to the time. And I think when people try to say that it was 1825, I'm sorry about that. I said 1848. I'm thinking about John G. Jones. But yeah, Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph was born in 1825. And it's very important to note this because, again, he was born before Reconstruction. He was born before the Emancipation Proclamation. And the fact that he was well-traveled, well-learned, well-to-do, You follow? It was just brilliant. Him and Frederick Douglass at the same time were the most popular black men in America at that time. So Dr. Pascal Beverly Randolph was definitely a forerunner to what we know today as North American mysticism, and in my opinion, he is the father of North American mysticism because he's the one who influenced the Theosophical Society. He's the one who influenced Reuben Swanberg Clymer to erect the Order of the Rose and Cross, and he inevitably is also the one who influenced Lewis to open up the ancient mystic Order of the Rose and Cross. And that's very important because when we're dealing with Dr. Pascal Beverly Randolph, we have to keep in mind that he raised a plethora of students, and some of these students stood very strong grounds on promoting his work, and one of those people were Reuben Swanberg Clymer. And Reuben Swanberg Clymer was often in heavy debate with Harvey Spencer Lewis, who's the person who erected the ancient mystic Order of the Rose and Cross in the 1900s, which is what most people are familiar with. It was around 1908, I think, when he did that. But I'm trying to find something. But anyway, I want to read this monograph to y'all. It's a master's monograph, and I want to keep in mind that this monograph is from a supplementary lecture from the Ancient Mystic Order of the Rose and Cross. I do not own this monograph. I did not write this monograph, but I definitely have read this monograph a plethora of times and interpreted it in my own way. I've written similar monographs to this, so I'm very familiar with the subject matter. And the reason that I'm about to present this is because I think it's very important for Freemasons to understand what Rosicrucianism is outside of the 18th degree work that you do when you go through God damn it, my mind is just not here early this morning. But anyway, I want Freemasons to know that Rosicrucianism is more than what you find in the 18th degree when you're going through the Scottish Rite. So it's very important that we digest some of this information to try to see, just to give you a little taste of what it is that Rosicrucianism in general has to offer. This is just one of the subject matters. Number 1, Ancient Mystic Order of the Rose and Cross, Rosicrucian Order, the Rosicrucian Mystery, Supplementary Lecture. Number 1, Fratres Sorors, greetings. Loyalty is devotion to whatever we esteem. Loyalty is thus a form of love. Like love, however, loyalty often arouses such an emotional stimulus as to blind our reason. When men become infatuated with beliefs, customs, and notions, they are thus often inclined to extend towards them this unreasoning loyalty. Consequently, they consider it a duty to oppose, if not attack, every thought or practice which may seem to them to challenge the supremacy of their preference. The most common example of this blind loyalty is to be found amongst the religionists, either through a misinterpretation of the sacred writings of their sect or the unmitigated desire to further exalt the founder or the Messiah. They attribute to him the whole context of their faith. They insist that all its liturgical writings, ritual, and ceremonies are a pristine revelation of the eminent sacred personality of their religion. They refuse to recognize antecedent ceremonies, customs, and liturgies which show that their faith is partially, at least, eclectic. To them, the fact that the mechanism of their faith, that is, the ritualistic structure, is similar to any other, seems to detract from its spiritual prominence. These individuals do not intend to further intolerance, but rather to add prestige to their own faith. Such an attribute has often resulted in gradual cultivation of religious hatred, which in turn has culminated in the religious wars of history. In reality, it detracts little from one's religious concept to know that others have thought as we before our time, and that we may have been inspired by other enlightened leaders. Okay? I read this part because this is a key point about the contributions that Rosicrucian gave to the development of the body or the philosophy of Freemasonry. Okay. Human thoughts must use as a vehicle of expression the symbols of words written or spoken. Spiritual concepts need more than words to reach the higher consciousness of humans, for all men do not have the same intelligence to appreciate them in like manner. The religious attitude, the spiritual consciousness, is an inner development. It must be engendered from within and not from without. What is taught as a religious doctrine can only be an impulse to stir the self. From the awakening of self, from intimate experiences arises those sensations, those notions which constitute the spiritual convictions. No one has been converted to a religion or a mystical doctrine who has not first experienced a change within his own emotional and psychic being. Since no given words are keys to unlock uniformly the selves of all men, other methods closer to the basic nature of mankind must be resorted to. There are aspects of man's nature which are far less variable than his reason. Our instincts are similar. The qualities of our senses are quite alike. Generally speaking, all sounds, scents, motions, colors are alike to us, either pleasing or displeasing. The more you approach the fundamental categories of man's being, the more you find men are much the same. Since men alike have preference for certain kinds of behavior and circumstances, it is to be expected that they will incorporate these things in their ways of living. Geometrical forms, combinations of lines, circles, squares, triangles, and the like, came to depict ideas through the centuries which were much more satisfactory to men than words of explanation. These forms or symbols became signs of relatively eternal truths. Combinations of sounds, as musical notes or the intonation of vowels, produced vibrations which almost always had a certain definite effect upon the psychic and emotional nature of the listeners. Fragrant incense, rhythmic gestures or movements, and the use of color arrangements were like the wise found to be in harmony with the inherent rhythm of man's sense of being. By skillful manipulation, sages, mystics, and philosophers discovered that these means were often more successful in reaching the soul or impersonal consciousness of an individual more quickly and with greater efficiency than a written or spoken creed. They were thus employed in ceremonies or rites by which to arouse the greater self. And this is why when you understand Sikhism, when you understand the psalms or the songs or the hymns of Dawood or David, when you understand that Arabiya is a sang language, the Arabic is sang. So if you ever spoke Arabic, you would automatically understand what I'm saying when you deal with words like, when you deal with verses like, Innu nasu karlahi, innu nasu Allahi kariban, innu nasu Allahi kariban. That's how you would read it. We would speak it like Innu nasu Allahi kariban, but you would literally, when you're reading it, it would be like Innu nasu Allahi kariban. You would know how to go up and go down so far as tones, because tones are very important in contacting God. This is why the supplementary lecture just stated that the music is incorporated into our rites and ceremonies, right, to arouse the higher or the greater self, the akbaru of you, that greater self. Okay. In antiquity, the mystery schools, which sought to convey a unique gnosis or higher knowledge of purpose of life and of moral living to mankind, used these slowly evolving signs, color combinations, sounds, and scents to institute initiatory rites. They became the hagiography and arcana, right, of the chosen few, okay? That is those who were tested and tried for worthiness to be advanced to illumination. Almost all of the high priest and prominent avatars of the great religions were also scholars. Scholarship is very important. They kept abreast of the advanced learning of their time, both profane and sacred. They studied philosophy, metaphysics, and the known sciences. Such sincere seekers would eventually find their way to the pranos of some mystery school of their period. If accepted and initiated, they would indubitably be impressed with the inspiring content of the mysteries introduced to them. Ultimately, what they experienced in their personal initiation in these mystery schools came to influence their own religious teachings and the rites and ceremonies of the faith which they represented. They could find no more effective manner for the conveying of an idea, for arousing a state of reverence, than by using some of the elements of the very initiation through which they had been passed. Not wishing to violate their sacred oaths of obligation, these initiates would not divulge to the devotees of their religious faith the origin of the liturgies and rites which they performed. The followers thus came to believe that these priests and sages had personally originated these things, or that they sprang from the very founders of their own sect. Unfortunately, later priesthoods who were under no such obligations failed to give credit to the source of the mystical substance of their religions, for fear, right, of alienating the devotion of their followers. Further, since later Christianity took the intolerant position of actually persecuting the mystery schools and their philosophers, it did not behoove Christianity, right, to make known the connections between some of their rites and these esoteric orders, their victims, right? Our depth to the mystery of antiquity is great. Each Rosicrucian should be familiar with their origin, purpose, and practice to the extent that such can be known today. It is for that reason we bring to you this most enlightening supplementary series of monographs on the Eleusinian mysteries. We know that you will have no false sense of loyalty, as we stated at the outset, that will close your mind to all other sources of knowledge for fear that they may be competitive with a former belief or creed. And this is why I personally feel like Rosicrucianism is a key element to the development of each individual Freemason. And every brother that steps into that 18th degree should take the Rosicrucian degree very seriously. To unreligionize yourself, to decalcify the pineal gland, to open the mind's eye so that you can see things just as they are, not the way you want them to be. Yeshua HaMashiach Aiso, Jesus the Christ said, when the eye is single, the whole body shall be filled with light. We should always understand that there is a limitation to that doctrine which bounds us within itself. So if we are in due bounds, right, of our moral obligations for that particular school of thought, we should never allow the restrictions of certain thoughts of other people to restrict you as the individual for growing on an individual basis. This is why Albert Pike was able to revise the French rectified right to come up with the morals and dogma. Okay, this is why John G. Jones was able to create what we know as the Prince Hall Shriners. Okay, this is why the majority of the greats that came before us, as stated earlier in the supplementary lecture, they were also scholars. All great gurus, which is the word that they were using for avatar. Avatar is usually interchangeable for the word guru. That means usually they're referring to a Middle Eastern, in specific, a Hindu mystic. When they use that word avatar. But today, obviously, it's a colloquial term which can be attributed to anybody who has achieved a certain level of enlightenment that supersedes their own students or those people around them. So Rosicrucianism, what it does is it unlocks the complete potential of the mind. It allows you to have an impeccable memory. It allows you the same type of benefits as Freemasonry, which is why it's incorporated into it. Freemasonry dwarfs it dwarfs Rosicrucianism to the point that Freemasonry is so large that if you're a Rosicrucian and you know Masons, they know the degree, but they don't really know what a Rosicrucian is. They don't know that there's separate degree work outside of it. And then those who do know that there's separate degree work outside of it, again, they only tend to refer it to the work of Lewis in the ancient mystic order of the Rose and Cross, when there's no one body, there's no one governing body for Rosicrucians. Like there is no United Grand Lodge of Rosicrucians that's passing out charters and giving subordinate lodges rights to exist. That's not how Rosicrucianism works. So yeah, but you do have different orders that specifically have a structure, like my order in particular here at the Non-Society Shrine of the Modern Mystic. We have aprons, we have collars, but we're Rosicrucians. We're also Masons in our facility, but that particular practice within itself is a Rosicrucian practice, which I would like to incorporate with Freemasonry. And I just came up on some good news, and I would like to talk to my good brother Walker, you know, from North Carolina, and you know, the brother Elder Tony Muhammad, because this is one of those things that I've actually been working on for a long time, attempting to incorporate the degree work that I've helped write and edit into an actual school of thought or a body of execution that will benefit Freemasons, so far as the degree work goes, in particular for Rosicrucians. I always felt like Rosicrucian mystery should have their own chapter, kind of like the Royal Arch degree. I think the Rosicrucians in Freemasonry should have their own chapter, and that they should teach according to the Rosicrucian doctrine that is in Freemasonry with the Knights of the Rose and Cross, and be in accordance with the guidelines, morals, and dogmas of Freemasonry, obviously, but also open the door for the more metaphysical mind, the more mystic mind, those people who are seeking to actually attempt to applicate some of the things that we learn. Again, I've had people come to me for candle magic. I've had people come to me for money magic. People come to me to teach them about sex magic, bondage, dominance, and submission, BDSM. You know, there's a plethora of things that you learn stepping into this realm, because it's not just allegory, it's not just symbolism, it's actual application. The rituals are not just for allegory and symbology. They're rituals that are utilized for an internal and external alchemical reaction to change your outlook, not only personally on the things around you, but the people around you. And it makes it a lot easier for people to take your school of thought serious when you are very well endowed in the origins and the knowledge of that school. And I just think that Rosicrucianism will open the mind to the mystic realm that exists for those brothers who have already went through like the Royal Arch and stuff like that. When we understand about those priests You feel me? And I think we should learn more about Melchizedek, who had no beginning and no end. I think we should learn more about Bar Jesus. I think we should know more about the many Christs that existed. I think we should learn about the many Messiahs that came, the many that died, resurrected, and rose again. Was crucified, died, and rose again. There's many different Messiah-like figures around the world that have had very similar processes of persecution, murder, and then for them to be resurrected as a Messiah, and then to ascend as well. So you have a whole movement in the early 1900s called the Ascended Masters, which is birthed out of Rosicrucian Christian mysticism. So you have the I Am movement, which is also birthed out of Rosicrucian mysticism. You have Reverend Ike, who they call the money preacher, who was also another student of Rosicrucian mysticism. How do I know these things? Because I can hear it in the way that they teach. I know it because I'm familiar with the subtext, I'm familiar with the text, I'm familiar with the degree work, I'm familiar with the monographs, I'm familiar with the supplementary lectures, I'm familiar with the lectures, I'm familiar with the videos, I'm familiar with the symbology, I'm familiar with the entire inner workings of what it is to be a Rosicrucian. Rosicrucianism is publicly beautiful. It's one of those things. If you're a Rosicrucian and you have on your stole, for instance, and you're out in public, no Rosicrucian brother is going to walk up to you and be like, why do you have on a stole? Like, what are you doing? Why are you showing people that you're a Rosicrucian? Because Rosicrucianism has always been about public exposure or public enlightenment, or the endowment of information to the common man to give everybody the opportunity to achieve illumination. That's one of those things that is different. Rosicrucians technically put out public manifestos, and then people respond to them by way of coming to wherever the manifesto person may be. The person who wrote the manifesto may be giving a public lecture, or maybe giving a small supplementary on something, or maybe giving a small class or workshop on something else, and then people might come through. That's kind of like how Rosicrucianism works today. And then you got meet groups where people be like, oh, if you're interested in Rosicrucianism, come on out, da-da-da. And then they have initiation rites, and then they have different degree work. Again, Rosicrucian degree work takes a long time to finish. It took me 2 years completely to finish 9 degrees of the given Rosicrucian work that I was particularly given from the Eleusinian Mysteries of Dr. Pascal Beverly Randolph. Again, coming out of Ruben Swanberg Clymer's work as well. So it's very interesting when I read Lewis's work, because Lewis is a very brilliant Rosicrucian who I think had a very healthy rivalry for Rosicrucianism with Clymer, so far as they were testing each other's information and trying to debunk each other's information, and I'm going to test this, and I'm going to see these results and write it down, because, Rosicrucianism is really like mystical physics. It's metaphysics, literally. It is you testing and constantly trying to quantify a thing and make it repeatable on a level that is unexplainable to the common or human mind and all other realms of logic. So it's a miracle craft. It's a craft that practices the manifestation of things that are not supposed to be. And it helps you navigate this matrix, and it also helps you construct this matrix in your favor. It teaches you how to identify the agent Smith. It also teaches you how to find the oracle. And more importantly, it teaches you how to be Neo. And with that being said, I'm finna go back into my state of Morpheus, because I got to get up out of here. But as usual, it's always a pleasure. Travel on light. And yeah, fraternal peace, man.